Maybe I was raised a little bit differently, but I see an awful lot of people lately disrespecting past generations of filmmakers. And this usually happens when those filmmakers decide to express their own personal opinions about modern films. Of course, we've seen it with Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, and a lot of people like to dismiss them by just calling them out-of-touch old men who are yelling at the clouds.
Get off my lawn.
But if you could take your recency bias out of it, you would see that these are the people that we should probably be listening to. They have proven success and longevity in the world of entertainment. So it might not be the worst thing to actually listen to what they have to say. Maybe we could use a little bit of informed criticism like only they could give. It might do modern cinema some good, and let's face it, it's in a very bad way right now. And now we can add John Carpenter to that list, a legend of filmmaking who is never one to hold back how he's feeling. But here's the thing, when I read you these quotes in a few minutes, you will see they're not even coming from a malicious place. In fact, none of these directors, I believe, are really coming from a malicious place. They are simply reacting to something from their own perspective. But in this day and age where people attach a movie they like to their own self-worth, they tend to take it personally when people criticize those movies. And I do believe this is something that we need to get past if we are ever going to have an abundance of quality films again. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
So just a little over a week after the $400 million disaster that was The Exorcist Believer, we have the legendary John Carpenter now weighing in on the situation. Now I want to make it very clear that he was obviously led into these conversations by the interviewer, and that is the interviewer's job. He's trying to get John Carpenter to say something that would make a good headline.
Because it's all part of the plan.
But I also can't undermine John Carpenter's willingness to be brutally and unapologetically honest. I strongly believe that we need more honesty like that in the world that we live in today. Too often people express themselves based on their desired reaction and not based on what they truly believe in their heart. And sure, you're going to have people who are going to get upset with your honesty, but I saw a great post about this somewhere recently on social media that said truth sounds like hate to those that hate truth. And honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself.
That makes sense.
So when I read you John Carpenter's quotes today, just know they are not coming from a place of hate. He's just being honest about what he is seeing, and that's all you can really ask of a person. And I think people really need to understand the difference between hate and honest criticism. He said, quote, "I like what David Gordon Green did when he made the 3 Halloweens. I love number 2, Halloween Kills. I thought that was fabulous. I heard The Exorcist really didn't cut it. That could be a kick-ass movie. I don't understand how you can screw that up." As far as him praising David Gordon Green's Halloween films, even though I strongly disagree, he's entitled to that opinion for whatever reason he said it, and I'm not going to sit here and tell John Carpenter that he can't say that. He's John Carpenter. He earned the right to give his honest opinion from his perspective.
Besides that, it's all in the reflexes.
As for his comments on The Exorcist Believer, he's clearly commenting from the outside looking in. But here's the thing, that doesn't make his take any less valid. He's right, it should have been a kick-ass movie. And it would seem difficult to screw something like that up. But guess what? It happened, and I can't stress this enough. Most times, especially with modern movies that are typically forgettable and uninspired, you pretty much know what you are going to be in for without even watching the film in question. And that says a lot about how predictably bad the film industry has become in recent years. John Carpenter is one of my top 3 favorite directors of all time. I consider most of my favorite films from him to be comfort films. When all else fails and I can't figure out what to watch on any given night, I can always throw in a John Carpenter film. Not only do they have a distinct style, but you honestly never know what you are in for when you sit down to watch a John Carpenter film. He could take the most off-the-wall and ridiculous idea on paper and make it look like the most unique and cool thing you've ever seen on screen. And that's the type of talent that's missing from modern Hollywood. And that's a big reason why modern films like The Exorcist Believer are not connecting with people. Because quite frankly, there's nothing to connect to.
The dreaded stinks!
Even John Carpenter's films that bombed at the box office gained a second life over time because eventually audiences realized the genius work that he was putting into them. And I'm sorry, but that's never going to happen with a David Gordon Green horror film. And I think that's what makes John Carpenter qualified to talk on these kind of subjects. He's actually lived it. Now that's not the only recent film that John Carpenter weighed in on. He also recently spoke about Barbie. And here's what he had to say. He said, quote, "I watched Barbie. I can't believe I watched Barbie. It's just not my generation. I had nothing to do with Barbie dolls. I mean, I could sum it up. She says, I don't have a vagina. And then at the end, she says, I'm going to the gynecologist. That's the movie to me. I mean, there's a patriarchy business in there, but I missed that whole thing right over my head." You know why I love John Carpenter? Because he's basically admitting, with this quote, that this movie clearly wasn't made for him.
It wasn't made for him.
And that's pretty much been my own personal stance this entire time. When you make a movie like Barbie, which may be great, but you insert certain messages into it in the way that they did, whether you agree with those messages or not, whether you understand them or don't understand them, in the end it doesn't really matter if those messages do not resonate with you as an audience member. And a movie like Barbie, of course, is not going to resonate with someone like John Carpenter.
I don't care!
Because he just doesn't have any connection to that property or the ideas contained within this film. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I find it interesting that both of the films that he is quoted as talking about in these interviews have lines or messages about the patriarchy. A combative topic that some people welcome in their films, and that some people could care less about, or the message might even ruin the film completely for them. And that is a fine line that you walk when you insert these ideas into your film. Some people are going to like it, and some people aren't. That's just the way it is.
Well, the world's a twisted place.
Now, obviously, it worked out for Barbie because that movie made a boatload of money, and those messages would seem to make a bit more sense contained within a film like that. And it did not work for The Exorcist because those messages felt out of place and frankly disrespectful. But again, this type of honesty that we're seeing from John Carpenter, Martin Scorsese, and other people like them should be cherished. And I hate to say it because it is a bit of a cliche, but they simply do not make people like this anymore. Or more accurately, society doesn't allow people to be like this anymore. There's nothing wrong with people bucking trends, not conforming, and speaking honestly, even if it's coming from an old school way of thinking of things. Because that's how conversation happens. Conversation leads to understanding, and understanding hopefully leads to change.
You have a point.
Do you know how many people try to diminish my opinions weekly by saying, well, you're in the minority, so it doesn't really matter? As if that is supposed to change my mind in some way. When it comes right down to it, I don't care about being in the minority or the majority. What I care about is always being honest, and hopefully that honesty shining through in my videos for everyone to enjoy. That involves staying true to myself and criticizing things when necessary, because in my eyes, that's the only way change is going to happen. Truthfully, we could learn a lot from people like John Carpenter, and I think we'd all be a lot better off if we could learn to be a bit more honest, just like him.
Y'all be cool. Right on.